We live in a baffling world, one that is both wonderful and woeful all at the same time. It's filled with love and loneliness, serenity and strife, kindness and cruelty. As the Oxford professor John Lennox once put it, the world we live in is full of beauty and bombs. A world that causes us to fluctuate from ecstasy to despair and everything in between. If you, like me, are the kind of person who finds themselves constantly asking questions of this world and its creator, thinking, yes, but what about? Then Ecclesiastes is the book for you. The teacher, Koheleth, introducing himself in verse 1, is a man who knows a thing or two about life. And in his latter years, he takes on a journey through the complexity of it all. And because he is a good teacher, he is careful not just to give pat answers and platitudes, but he actually encourages us to sit in the tension, giving us hints, signs along the way for where we can take those baffling thoughts next. Ecclesiastes is going to help us to look full in the face of the tension between the wonderful and the woeful. To avoid becoming the kind of people who only look to the wonder and try to pretend that there is no woe, while also not allowing ourselves to plunge into the depths of despair without a fight to discover life's joy. The teacher can help us, but his title is actually perhaps a little bit misunderstood, or maybe better understood as gatherer. The writer of Ecclesiastes was someone who held court, someone who attracted inquirers from all over Israel and actually all over the world. Kings would come, queens would come to seek out his wisdom. Verse 16 tells us that the teacher had gained more wisdom than anyone in all of Jerusalem's history. And in chapter 2, he will go on to say that he had greater possessions than anyone had ever had in Jerusalem. And according to Scripture, that can only be one person. In 1 Kings 3:12, God says to Solomon, I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. 1 Kings 4 tells us that all of King Solomon's knowledge and understanding couldn't be quantified, and that people would come from all nations to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world. So we're going to say with some high degree of confidence, this is Solomon. That's who we're going to say is the writer of Ecclesiastes all the way through. And he was a genius. He was one of the most powerful people on the planet. He was minted. His wealth amassed to a contemporary equivalent of 2 trillion, yes, 2 trillion pounds. He had the pick of all the women in Israel and the surrounding nations. He ate the most lavish of food and threw the biggest parties. He undertook and completed construction projects that no one had ever seen on that scale before. So as we begin, can we just throw off that cynical thought, oh, these religious, churchy types don't know what the world is really like. Not like me or my friends. No, Solomon was so influential that worldly passions followed his lead. This guy had experienced all that the world had to offer, and we would do well to take heed of his blunt warnings at the end of his life. Now, as we work through Ecclesiastes, we want to help you to get to grips with how earthy this is, how applicable it is to the nitty-gritty of everyday life. So each week we are going to attach an everyday theme. Today we begin with Fleeting Fridays. So think of that Friday feeling that you so look forward to, maybe on a Thursday or a Friday morning, and you're thinking, oh, Friday night is coming. How much do you look forward to that? Now think of how quickly they pass and how quickly Monday mornings come. Life is like candle smoke. Meaningless is an unfortunate translation. He is not saying life is without hope or meaning. This is not the beginning of a treatise for fatalism. Life is not pointless, some kind of chocolate teapot. 7 times in Ecclesiastes, Solomon repeats that actually life is good, to be enjoyed even. And the whole direction of Ecclesiastes is towards what he calls the conclusion of the matter, something we will touch every week. Because actually, Ecclesiastes should really be read as a whole and understood as a whole. And we're going to get to the conclusion of the matter every week in some way. I'm coming to that. But right now, Solomon is painting the picture of what the world looks like when we attach life's meaning and significance to the things in front of us, the imminent things. And if that's all we have, he's saying, these things will in the end be meaningless and insignificant. The Hebrew word translated meaningless here is actually hevel, which is literally translated vapor, smoke, breath. Imagine yourself on a cold January morning. It's probably not that hard to imagine right now, unfortunately. And breathing out, and you see that vapor. You see your breath in the cold air. But as soon as you see it, it almost just as quickly disappears. In his commentary in Ecclesiastes, Iain Provan retranslates verse 2 like this: the merest of breaths, everything is a breath. Finley turned 6 on the final day of 2025. And as I watched him blow out his candles, I did not get the impression that he was looking at the disappearing smoke and thinking, oh, just like that, another year gone. Where did they all go? As his dad, however, I am becoming more and more aware of the increasing pace of the years as they pass. At the puff of my 4 candles, yes, each representing 10, I couldn't help but think, where did my 30s go? I've only just stopped grieving the end of my 20s. How can this be? Didn't I only just leave school? Like the Friday feeling at the end of a working week, life is fleeting. It's here for a short time, and then it's suddenly gone. But the words of Ecclesiastes are actually strangely reassuring. Even Solomon, with all his achievements, had the same niggle. He, in his rhetorical question, has a firm and clear answer. What does a person gain by all the toil at which they toil under the sun? Nothing. Solomon uses the cyclical nature of the earth to drive home his point. We come and we go like the rising and setting of the sun, and very little really changes. As David Gibson points out, or puts it, we live on a cosmic merry-go-round. King David described it like this in Psalm 103. The life of mortals is like grass. They flourish like a flower of the field. The wind blows over it, and it is gone, and its place remembers it no more. We are here today, gone tomorrow. Verse 11, no one remembers the former generations. Maybe you had a granny, a favorite granny, a granny you loved. Now, no matter how influential she was in your life, she is unlikely to be a fixture in your children's thoughts. And by the time their own children grow up, she'll be no more than a name on a family tree. And no matter how special we might think we are, the same is very likely to be true for you and for me. But not only is it fleeting, it's elusive. It's hard to grab hold of. On your next birthday, try to grab the smoke from your birthday candles. You can't. It's like verse 14, chasing after the wind. There are two ways in which life is elusive. The first is this, that the experience is never full. We struggle to absorb our experiences, don't we? To really take it all in. It can't be caught and put in a jar. I remember when I left school and went off exploring the world for myself, I would always make sure to take my disposable camera with me. Yes, I am 40. The grainy photos are now a reminder that actually life and the experience of life always has with it a deficit. It cannot be fully captured. The sights, sounds, and smells are never completely processed and digested in our minds. The other way in which life is elusive is the lack of control we have over it. Wind cannot be shepherded. I was working for my parents' house in Fife this week, and so I decided to take an afternoon off and build a sandcastle, not on my own, with my kids. And we dug out a big moat, and then we built up the foundations, and then we started to place the castles on it. And we took quite a bit of time on it. We were quite proud of it. But of course, the inevitable took place. The tide rolled in, and the work we had been so proud of was washed away to nothing. Life is like building a sandcastle. But instead of realizing that it's going to wash away in the tide, we think it's impervious. We think it's impenetrable. We forget that there are changing tides. We pretend we are in control, as if the tide isn't coming. And even if it does, maybe my work will hold. We fool ourselves into thinking that our little contribution on the earth will remain significant, important. That's why I have far more existential angst now than I did age 25. And I have to stave off the kind of temptation that comes with midlife. Life was not in front of me. Life was in front of me at 25. And only some of it is in front of me now. At that stage, I'm not even sure I had acknowledged that the water out there was tidal. Now my life has, in many ways, I've got to that stage where I realize I have many years in front of me, but I've gone far enough to realize that they will come quickly. I've had a pretty straightforward and blessed life, to be honest with you, but the castle still hasn't taken shape in the way that I hoped that it would. Not at 25, anyway. My expectations have changed. Wasn't I supposed to have done things that had greater significance and meaning by now? The temptation is to find another venture. Our current life has lost its shine, and so let's go find something shinier. But verse 9 says there is nothing new under the sun. And of course, it's not that there is literally nothing new under the sun. New discoveries to be made, new ventures to be had. But there is an end to the satisfaction and pleasure that these things can provide. When these things remain our source for happiness, when that's where we put our hope, they only become the latest version of unfulfilled expectation. Like that Friday feeling, life is as fleeting as candle smoke. And Solomon presents another problem with life here. Not just candle smoke, but crooked scales. Havel doesn't just mean breath or smoke. It actually is the root of a Hebrew name that you are probably familiar with, a name that Solomon may be pointing us to, and that's back in Genesis 4, and that name is Abel. His brother Cain was jealous of the favor God had given him. And Cain tragically and shockingly murders Abel out in the fields one day. Abel's young death at the hands of injustice is a picture of just how unfair this world can be. Too often there is a horrible imbalance to the scales of life. The hardest workers don't always get their just desserts. The most meticulous economist does not always end up on the right side of the markets. You invested hours in your child's homework and spent time praying and reading the Bible with them, but now they're in their 30s without a job and haven't come to faith yet. The cancer cells haven't listened to our tears or our desperate pleas, even in the name of Jesus. I am acutely aware that I, in some ways, am a walking representation of a famous Glasgow statistic. I grew up in Lenzie, a lovely suburb to the northeast of the city. And in the 90s, when I was growing up, a statistic emerged that compared the life expectancy of men in Lenzie to men in Calton in the East End. Only 7 miles apart, men in Lenzie were expected to live to 82, while in Calton it was only 54. It wasn't fair. And although that particular statistic isn't as extreme as it was, by all counts, being born into social deprivation is a far harder place to start life than it is in an affluent home in a good school catchment. Middle class people don't have more brain cells, it's just that it's not fair. Sometimes we put in all the toil and sweat that we need to meet the goals we have in life, but the goals remain unmet. Perhaps you've been doing that in your work. Years of toil to gain a promotion you have always dreamed of, all the while some schmoozing skiver who hadn't even been there until last year took all your credit and got that promotion. Call it what it is. Unfair. These are crooked scales. What is lacking can't be counted, second part of verse 15. Justice does not yet reign. The goodness of God has not been made complete on the earth. We all, and the whole weight of the world, comes up short. Desperately short. So short that there is no sum that could possibly be large enough to count the gaping lack between the world as it is and the world as it should be. Stay with me. We're going to get to hope. Now, when it comes to decreasing that gap, you would think that the more wisdom you have, the more ability you would gain to right the wrongs and come up with solutions. But Solomon shows us through this survey of everything under the sun is actually quite the opposite. In fact, he says in verse 19, the more knowledge, the more grief. Even the Solomon types, as God-given and useful as they are, these intellectual elites, professors, doctors, government advisors, consultants, this or that, do not have the ability to fix all the problems of the world. The world is a perplexing place, and working out how it all works is beyond us, even the brightest and best. And it leaves Solomon angry. Maybe you're sitting there right now, angry. You're thinking of some of the injustices in your own life, or people that you know, or things that are happening around the world, and you are angry. He wasn't only angry at the world, but at God. Why put us here in the middle of this horrible tension between happiness and hell? Why give us this heavy burden? Verse 13. I thought you were kind, not cruel. The ESV translates this work of discovering what life is truly like as an unhappy business, and other versions call it a miserable task. Anyone who has endured a tragic loss understands this very well. Life can go from blessing and joy to pain and misery in the time it takes for a lorry driver to glance down at their phone or at the results of a scan at the hospital. The death and injustice of this world should anger us. Can we be clear on that? Our outrage, though, presupposes a standard of good that is in us all. No matter how many hard layers have encased our hearts over the years, there is within us what the Apostle Paul will later describe as a law written on our hearts and a conscience that bears witness to a God who has made this world for good and not evil, and who will one day restore it all. That there is a longing within us for the goodness to come and to prevail. The reason we're angry is because it's not right. And God thinks the same thing. I mentioned earlier that Solomon will affirm the goodness of life 7 times in Ecclesiastes, and that number is actually no accident. In ancient Hebrew, 7 is used to indicate that something is or will be made complete. It's as if Solomon is signaling to us that despite the lack in this current world that we live in, the completion of goodness will be achieved. That we will be able to experience life as it was supposed to be, in all of its fullness. That the impossible measurement of the world's shortcomings will one day be represented by the simplest number there is, 0. No pain, no suffering, no tears. That all things will be restored and made good. And it will come in the person we find in the final lines of Ecclesiastes, the one who is able to hear our frustrations and give us grace. Chapter 12, verses 13, 14. Here it is, the conclusion of the matter. The conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. The answer is in God. Look to him and his ways for a sorting, for a redeeming, for all that is under the sun. Yes, our lives are like candle smoke, a mere breath in comparison to the enduring and circular nature of the earth. The eternal nature of God makes the natural world look like a mere breath, because he is from everlasting to everlasting. Psalm 90, verse 2. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting you are God. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God. And it is this same God that Isaiah 40, verse 4 says is coming to make the crooked straight. A voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, or as some versions have it, the crooked shall be made straight, the rugged places a plain. All of creation and the development of history may seem to be circular, all the same, nothing new. Our life's just pointless puffs of smoke, but through it all, God has been threading a story of redemption, his purposes at work through all generations, a story that led to the appearing of one who came after the voice in the wilderness in Isaiah's prophecy after John the Baptist. I began by quoting John Lennox, the Oxford professor in mathematics and science, who described the world as being full of beauty and bombs. This is how he continues in a conversation that I watched recently. Granted that it's like that, beauty and bombs, is there any evidence out there anywhere that there is a God who understands it? And to such an extent that I can see there is a possibility of coming to some peace about it. Is there any evidence out there of a God who understands it? Oh, there's evidence. In all of his wisdom, Solomon could not understand it all. He could not bring an end to death. He couldn't grasp hold of life, nor could he make straight the paths of injustice. But there is one who shows us he did not only understand the pain of the gaps, but he entered into that gap and experienced it in its fullness. He made a way for our lives not to be like some fleeting Friday feeling that slips through our fingers. He is the one John proclaimed would come after him. And as we follow him, he takes us to a Friday that will not be forgotten. Good Friday. Good Friday is where we see him there. The one who by his breath had created the world, but is now dying as if he was a mere breath. He is the righteous one, punished to straighten out what is crooked. There he is, paying the price of the huge and incalculable sum of all our failures, so that our sins would be counted as zero. Nothing. On Good Friday, death dies. Good triumphs over evil. In Jesus, we have died to a fleeting and futile existence and been raised into an eternal and significant life. In Jesus, who will return and make all things new, our lives are redeemed. We can say, sin and death has no hold on me. And on the third day, the Sunday, the new Adam was raised from the dead as the first fruits of a new creation. And he is raised now, reigning above it all, promise that he will return and he will make all things new. He will make all things good again. Filling the earth, every atom, from sea to sea, with his glory. In Jesus, we see the goodness of God on full display. When we put our faith in him and give him our lives, we no longer need to live our lives as if they are just a breath. But we are joined to the everlasting purposes of God. We are joined to the mission of God, spreading the goodness of God in all we do. It's not fleeting. The tide doesn't roll in on the work done to the glory of God and for the good of the world. It's not without meaning. Even the smallest of tasks done to the glory of God are now weighed with an eternal significance. The answer is in God, who is from everlasting to everlasting. The God who hung on a tree. When life seems more woeful than wonderful, when you can't see past the injustices of life, here are 3 simple things that you can do to help you. SMS. Sing, memorize, specify. Sing. Spend regular time worshiping God. It will tune your heart to his glory and make the object of your desire him rather than the fleeting things. Spotify, a cappella, nobody else is listening apart from God. He loves your out-of-tune voice. Just go for it. My inclination is to only think my way through these problems. But when I do make that conscious effort to worship God, to raise my voice, to sing to his glory, to remember who he is, the Spirit of God does something in my heart that thinking alone cannot do. Memorize. Memorize verses from the Bible that will help you to know that God will work through all of these things, all these disappointments, all that is woeful even, to bring about goodness in your life. The obvious one is Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Specify. Write down a list of people, or maybe even things that you would be doing that day, who you can spread the goodness of God to. God has given you a task to help people see that they don't have to give themselves to the futile things. They can give themselves to the things that are of eternal significance and worth. And then ask the Holy Spirit to help you to do that. We cannot do that in our own power and strength. And we need him to help us to show the goodness of God through our lives. Whether that's your family, your flatmates, your course mates, husbands, wives, colleagues, choir members, fellow dog walkers, whoever it is, write them down and ask God, would you help me to show them your goodness? Help them to see that goodness is coming when Jesus returns. We need to get real with the tensions of life. But might I challenge us through this series to say that we need to get even more real about what Jesus has achieved, so that we might be filled with hope in a hurting world.